Hello, everyone. My name is Karr, and I would like to welcome you all to today's webinar, Connection's latest Connectors Conversation Panel, a web discussion designed to bring thought-provoking perspectives and brilliant protagonists together around a timely topic to cultivate community growth. We appreciate your participation and would especially like to thank Legion Star, that sits at the crossroads of the cloud, ERP, and security, for their support in sponsoring this event. Today's discussion will be about how brands are leveraging digital marketing. We'll focus on how marketing strategies have fundamentally changed with the injection of modern technology that allows for a two-way conversation. Our session will bring together unique perspectives on brand transformations, including insights into how and when to use social media. We'll talk about tools and software needed, the importance of data analytics, and a lot more. We have 3 speakers joining us to connect the dots, and although they have very different responsibilities and backgrounds, I think you'll be impressed at the common threads. So to start off, each of them will provide a few comments about a key issue, and then I'm going to step back and let them chat. We'll have time for some questions, especially at the end, so please submit any questions that you have using the comment function on YouTube. If we don't get to all of your questions, we'll follow up within 24 hours. But first, let me share a little bit about our speakers. Dr. Nancy Salisbury is a senior advisor and strategist on using digital interactions to spread ideas, influence minds, and build business. She earned her PhD in organizational leadership, specializing in social media. Nancy lives in Austin, Texas. She's teaching social media and public relations at St. Edward's University and leading engaging campaigns to reach stakeholders directly. Brooke Mallick is the VP of Marketing for Big Blue Swim School, where she spearheads integrated consumer marketing programs for the rapidly growing brand. Prior to Big Blue, Brooke spent several years at PepsiCo in domestic and global marketing roles for the Gatorade and Quaker brands, and served Fortune 500 CPG and retail clients as a management consultant before that. Douglas Karr, last but not least, has been leading companies through digital transformations his entire career, both as a digital transformation speaker and as a consultant. He is currently the founder of the expert podcast, The Martech Zone, and VP and partner of Hybridge, a firm specializing in helping clients maximize their investment utilizing Salesforce technologies. Okay, so with those introductions, I want to thank you all for attending, and let's get going. Okay, so Nancy, we're going to start with you here. Let's start with the big picture. So what I've been dying to ask, what is so different about digital marketing? You know, we keep asking, does it fundamentally change the way that companies approach marketing strategies, or is it really just a different tool? Nancy, your perspective.
Excellent. Thanks for having me, Kara, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. Digital marketing is really just another tool in our promotional publicity marketing tool bag. It aligns with all of the other tools that we already have: magazines, television, print ads, billboards, and it needs to be used in conjunction with all of these tools. And the beauty of social media is that it is the one type of promotional tool that we have that consumers actually come to get engaged. It's not, a bench, that we're driving by, or a billboard that we're driving by. It's actually something that they choose to get involved in. So brands that are successful and effective are the ones that are engaging with their stakeholders.
Okay, great. I'm going to come back to you because I want you to name names about who's doing that well. Okay, so Brooke, you've worked with some real powerhouse CPG brands. So help us understand how the industry overall is approaching digital marketing and social media, particularly concerning the use of data, which I know you've really been focused on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kara. And to springboard off of what Nancy shared, right? In my time at Gatorade, especially, right, it was as a lot of these platforms like Twitter and Facebook were really gaining speed and momentum. And Gatorade in particular in the early days was really so powerful at how they not only utilized, to Nancy's point, being where someone was showing up, but early days of social listening, right? And really engaging in it as a two-way conversation. Because then not only can you get smarter about bringing data about your consumers to the platforms, but using those platforms to generate more data on your brand's behalf. So whether it was my time at Gatorade, even watching through today, what PepsiCo and others are still doing lately, I've been really fascinated watching Doritos and all of their influencer marketing on TikTok. So perhaps we can come back to that, right? But over the years, whether it's been through user-generated content, through two-way conversations or social listening, on Quaker was a huge one for us with health trends, or even utilizing digital marketing so that you're feeling very of the moment. I think there are things that you've seen in key events that utilize digital marketing in a way that TV, or to your point, a billboard, Kara, or an ad, a banner on the sidelines of the Super Bowl never could from a Gatorade perspective, to be able to be posting in real time about the March Madness games. Or any other sports property, right? So it's just allowed us to deepen that two-way conversation by bringing the best of your data and getting more in return through those digital channels.
Those footprints leave, the data creates more data, right? So we're going to talk a lot about those footprints. Absolutely. Okay. So speaking of footprints, that's created by technology, which of course plays a huge role in digital marketing. So Douglas, help us understand, your perspectives on how the buying journey has changed because of technology and all those online resources that are now available.
Yeah, and it reinforces everything that Nancy and Brooke were absolutely saying. What's happening now with consumers and businesses alike is that everybody is self-serving, and so we're actually looking up the information ourselves. And so, there's stages of the buying journey. That the first thing that we do is we have a problem. What do? We go look it up online. We might look it up on YouTube or a search engine or in an industry group. Then we look at what solutions are out there. Then we start to build requirements and see what we really need and how to personalize that to ourselves. And then we look at people's reputations. So the things that Nancy and Brooke were talking about is, we start to look at who the companies are out there and what their products and services are like, or even what their culture is like within the organization and whether we want to do business with them. And then we come back and we validate them. So if it's our family, sometimes it's, a couple or a spouse getting together and kind of validating that and coming to a consensus on whether to purchase or not. If it's a business, a lot of times it goes back to a committee where, you discuss all of these things. And the magic of all of this is that it happens without ever contacting the company. And so the challenge now for businesses is that they have to be where the consumers and businesses are at. If someone's looking at a specific problem, they need to be out there and explaining the problem and the value of the solution. If somebody's looking for a solution, obviously they need to be listed, with those solutions, whether it's on a map, of local, roofers, or whether it's on an analyst site and whether they're in the top right quadrant, as far as an enterprise solution. So that's what's really transformed. And so it's really challenged businesses to both be out there, obviously, with content marketing strategies, social media strategies, listening strategies, so understanding what people are looking for. And then, of course, Brooke's an expert at this, but the measurement strategies, understanding, whether the information that you're putting online is actually, of value and driving conversions.
Perfect. Okay. So there's a lot to unpack here. And again, I want to step back and let you guys talk, but I just let's define digital marketing. So is it just marketing with technology? And is that why we're generating all this data that Brooke is now taking advantage of? It may be magic for the consumer to be able to now find all this information, but do the brands look at it the same way?
I'll go ahead and jump in on that, Kara. I think from a practitioner's perspective that a lot of what we're learning right now, right, to build on our points of how important it is to be following the data, and to Doug's point of being where your consumers are, right? I'm very fortunate at Big Blue that we own our own data and our own point of sale system for all intents and purposes, and we're able to track that, right? The beauty of the digital marketing channels by now is that they're so easily trackable in real time. I was sharing we had a sale go live today, so a shout out to my team that is doing a fantastic job, right, knocking another program out of the park. But I think the critical part of that is being able to make that data actionable, digitally, but we're seeing the impact of offline as well, right? That we've really needed in a local marketing perspective where we're going to new towns, building awareness to scale a smaller brand. It has been helpful to have customers see offline, oh, I've seen a sign for Big Blue. I've read on my favorite blog elsewhere, right, about the importance of swim lessons, and it's the number one risk of death for children under 4, right? So then by the time digitally they're fed our Big Blue ads, and today seeing our emails go live, because that's all branded along a common thread with common talking points, digital marketing for us has really become an extension that you want to flex the different channels of what part of the message is hitting there, but it should all work as matching luggage to be the most impactful. And we're really seeing a much greater return when we're able to support offline marketing through to digital marketing and then finally to sale.
Nancy, I want to direct the question to you though. So when we talk about digital marketing, Brooke just mentioned a whole bunch of different tactics, including email and offline. So a lot of times people talk about digital marketing just as social media. Are they different? Is one a part of the other? How does it all fit together?
That's a great question. And I'll bounce off of both what Brooke and Doug were talking about. In terms of digital marketing, it really is a whole umbrella. And you're bouncing off of one another. You want to think of digital marketing as media, just media in general. And if you look at the Pesos model, Pesos media means paid media, earned media, shared media, and owned media. So Brooke just mentioned if her company, Big Blue, placed a story, they earned media coverage from a morning news show, the local newspaper, about safety around the pool. Okay, that would be earned media coverage. That story would get put online through those different channels. Your company could take advantage of that by promoting that story to your users or any of your stakeholders. You could also promote that story via geofencing, depending on where someone is walking, to engage. You know, if you're walking along, let's say, your local lake or your local park, you might want to throw that ad in about swimming lessons because you're worried about your kids.
So when does it cross from being helpful and providing the information to being creepy?
Well, I think that's a challenge where we're at right now, and we're starting to see the backlash of that. Both there's a couple of downsides to it. When I used to work in traditional media and newspapers and direct mail, and it was very expensive, right, to set up a campaign and monitor that campaign and everything else. So we were very, very research driven, very careful that we didn't overstep any boundaries. Digital provided this incredibly cheap medium for us to just flood the market with more and more ads or more and more emails or anything else. And then to top it off, some marketers abused some of that data. And so now consumers are pushing back a little bit from a privacy standpoint and everything else. And so the challenge for us as marketers is to put out the information of value in the mediums and channels that, like Nancy just mentioned, where they're looking for it, and to be of value to your audience and be of value to your potential clients. And that's the rub is you could just go out and spam everybody and maybe you'll get 1 out of 100,000 that'll buy your product and you can grow your sales. But long term, I think that's a defeating purpose. And so we have to be very cautious of our brand and our reputation online because it can change, in an instant.
And I think something interesting to build on Doug's point, and then Nancy, I might have a follow-up question for you out of this for best practices, right? Is I think with some of the backlash of being retargeted, being found, to such a sharp point by the brands themselves is part of this spread and diffusion to say, let's rely more on influencer marketing to utilize other people's brands and reputations, to Doug's point, to build that steam, right? So, for example, Tonal is one I've been following a lot. I had gotten a Peloton and I've followed the rise of some of these like at-home workout models, right, since COVID. And tonal's been a really interesting one to me because I rarely see an ad from tonal. And I don't doubt that I am the right target for tonal, but what I see instead on Facebook and Instagram are sponsored posts from other fitness influencers, parent influencers, so that really the message is coming entirely from them, right? It's never being fed to me from tonal. It's coming from, I'm trying to remember one that I saw yesterday, from Fit Dad, right? Or something like that, of that nature, to show he's at home, it's in his space, he's authentically reacting to it, so that it doesn't feel like I've been found by this brand and the brand won't leave me alone, but like 7 of their influencers have found me instead. So Nancy, I know you've worked a lot with influencers in kind of reputation management. I'm curious if you have advice or best practices of how brands get started in the research phase and in the engagement phase, or best utilization of influencers.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about audience analysis, understanding, meeting them where they're at, and providing, as Doug said, providing value for them. So you want to look at what are their needs, what are their beliefs, what are their values, and you can kind of find that by, giving a snapshot of how they're living their life. Gone are the days of direct marketing where you threw out the net by zip code range. Now we are, you are really micro-targeting people for, how they're living their lives. It's a lifestyle. And you leverage influencers, and they're creating, as you said, the shared media. So if someone had typed in, oh my gosh, I've got to make dinner and I'm already running 20 minutes late, that would be a chance for an influencer who might be in the, Rachel Ray, to send out, here's a great recipe when you only have 20 minutes to cook dinner. They might not use it that day, but that would be in the back of their mind. And that brand that leveraged Rachel Ray and her cooking style, that's how that comes into their box or their feed. And that's how they're getting influenced.
What's the difference between influencers and user-generated content, and how do you control them?
Oh, that's a good one. User-generated content, it's pretty much the same thing, because you have your influencer. You've just got to you're letting go of the reins. It's considered shared content at that moment. You plant the idea in an influencer's mind, just like you would plant the idea in an editor's mind of a newspaper or of a morning news show. It's just a different type of gatekeeper that is holding the information and giving it to a different type of audience, where it's not the earned media of a published, newspaper or magazine. It is now, pushed out by the influencer. They're the ones that are the gatekeeper.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, customer testimonials and customer reviews, the reason Nancy and Brooke both touched on this, and that's that trust factor, right? That it wasn't your company selling me. It was somebody other, that had a great experience with your brand or, your product or service. And so that user-generated content comes with it with a level of authenticity and trust that sometimes brands cannot get, through a marketing message alone. And so user-generated, like if you're a local contractor for home services, if you're not requesting reviews on a daily basis from every customer that you're doing business with to stack up those reviews and build your visibility on local search, your competitors are going to, take you over. And so you have to be really, really cognizant of that. And that I love, I think there's kind of that 3 breakups, right? Is a user-generated content like a review, they might not have a huge following, but the impact of that review might be phenomenal, right? And then advocacy, employee advocacy, influencers, all of those channels, provide this incredible authenticity that we sometimes, can't get as a brand, because a lot of times when we're shifting a brand, we're trying to create this image that we want people to attain. But all of these influencers and advocates and and customers out there are absolutely creating what our brand truly is, out to the audience. And so we have to be cognizant of, are they reacting and consistently providing the same view that we continue to promote? Because if you're not, then you're going to do damage, to your brand if you're going in the opposite direction.
Right. And I think all of you, when we were doing our prep calls, you all talked about customer service being a much bigger part nowadays because of what Doug just talked about than it has been in the past, because the consumer's perception of you isn't just the product. It's also how you respond to customer complaints, customer issues, right? So is customer service now tied at the hip to marketing? I mean, from a governance perspective, how do we manage this?
Policies and procedures in place within the company on how quick are you going to respond? What are the responses? You don't want your response to look too canned. And your response also has to stay on brand voice.
And to build on that, I think, Kara, where it sits in the organization is an interesting one. We have a rather large, team that provides customer service within Big Blue across our different locations. And it sits right now, with marketing, but it also has a strong operational component because of the nature of our work, as well as then importance that they're really, the feed, they're a main touch point for us of getting some more of that customer information back there. Even, Douglas, to the point of they're the ones chasing down, can we help with remediation on improving poor reviews, right? Getting those down off of Yelp, off of Google My Business. So they play a really critical role. And Douglas, I'm curious if you have best in class practices on how to scale things like that digitally, because that is something that we see a lot of now that, to your point, I think as everything has moved online and we're marketing to customers online, they expect to be able to chat with us anytime, day or night, or send a Facebook message and receive a response, right? I think it creates a different sense of what I deserve as a customer, because in every other aspect, the brand gets to have a two-way conversation with me. So they would like us to be there when they want to be heard.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things there. One is I can't say how important this is. Kara, all you have to do is look at and I won't mention the name, but a major cable company that literally changed its brand, right? Because it had poor customer service associated with its products and services. And imagine a company that's decades old and everything else having to transform, change the logo, change the name, everything into a new brand because their customer service was lacking and that word got out and it literally destroyed their brand. And they had to reinvent themselves and come up with all of these channels that Brooke's talking about and listening and everything else. Social listening is your friend in this case. Most organizations now deploy, if it's an enterprise level organization, deploy a social listening tool. And that's that. It's not just people talking at you, but people talking about you. So you have keywords on brand, people, services. Sometimes it's even industry. And then these systems basically have routing mechanisms. And so if it's a customer service issue, typically you can route it directly to customer service. And it's actually prioritized very high because instead of someone calling and personally complaining, they're publicly complaining, so everybody gets to see. And I don't think that that's a negative in any way, shape, or form, because a lot of consumers now, obviously, we know that people make mistakes, brands make mistakes, and I think that honestly, that consumers are becoming a little bit more cognizant of that, and they allow a certain level of negative reviews or and everything, but what they will do is watch your response.
Right.
Nancy's the first thing Nancy said was speed, right? The speed of the response. Did someone respond? And then the quality of that response and whether people got the assistance. Sometimes you have to take it offline. I have a dentist that just got a negative review, and they can't discuss it online because of HIPAA, and everything else. And so, but I said, immediately, get on there, respond, offer them a phone number to call you direct, a name of a person to contact you personally, so that everybody that's watching can see that you do care and that you are responding appropriately. But yeah, it can have a devastating impact. And imagine being a marketer, a CMO, with spending millions of dollars on a product or service, and then customer service is falling down. And what's literally happening is that return on investment that you're making in marketing and sales and advertising is destroyed, because of this on the other side. You have to pair up the two and work together.
Let me stay with you for a second, Douglas. You talked about social listening. What other categories of technologies should companies, both big and small, because there's obviously, Brooke, I'm sure you've seen the difference between what you were used to at PepsiCo and what you're using now. So what are some of the categories of tools and technology that can really help digital marketers succeed?
I'm a huge proponent of, search engine marketing. One of the reasons why I tend to look at search a lot is that it tends to be an intent engine. So if someone's going to make a purchase or they have a problem, the first thing they typically do is go to a search engine. And so within search engines, you have just a monumental amount of data. You can look at trends. So you can look at seasonality on complaints. So I worked with a pest control company, and we were able to actually break down geographically across the United States and see when complaints would rise on certain pests. And so what they were able to do was match that with content and promotions and everything else. And that all of that data is out there. The other thing is they can look at competition. So they can absolutely see where their competition is getting more accolades, more mentions, more shares, more backlinks, than they're getting. And so they can look at how they're performing against their competition and whether they're providing the same amount of value. And so search engines is that one. And then, of course, I mentioned social media monitoring is another huge, just because you can monitor now with artificial intelligence and natural language processing. You can actually measure sentiment. And so you can see whether it's a negative connotation associated with it or a positive. And over time, you can see whether your brand is improving or not improving. So those are the two places that I see just tons of opportunity from, listing. And then Brooke is the expert here, I think, from a data standpoint, and maybe I'll just push this over to Brooke. One of the challenges with that is omni-channel, right? Is is somebody, complaining, on a comment on a video, and how does that weigh compared to someone, on Facebook, compared to someone maybe in a LinkedIn industry group? How do you measure and kind of put together an omni-channel, analysis of how you're performing online?
That's a fantastic question, Douglas. And I think something that we're still really wrestling with on the smaller side. I mean, I will say, to think back to Pepsi days and some of the bigger brands, right? I think that's where you get into your point, that enterprise level, some of the social listening tools that were so fantastic at, not only, to your point, measuring the sentiment, knowing the differentiation, right? I think some of it comes down to, when you're talking about different channels, who are you listening to and for what brand? And, if it's for Gatorade, I'm not going to have much of a worry about what someone's saying on LinkedIn about Gatorade versus, what's being said on, if it's going rampant on, Instagram, on TikTok. I think that's a different feeling, right? Yeah. But what I think was really interesting from a brand and even an innovation perspective, in terms of bringing it back to the AI ability to listen, was we were even using it then from an innovation perspective, right? Of, I like this, I don't like this. There's a growing demand when I was in the health food space, right? Of people are really talking a lot about turmeric positively. Can we put turmeric in something, right? So I think there's a lot of ways that fed into the brand, and being able to pick that across, and to your point, different utilizations of how people talk about things like recipe trends, right? On a Twitter versus an Instagram. I think it's all about what is the brand and what is the level of conversation that people are having where, knowing how differently they use some of those platforms.
Speaking of platforms, I want to shift over to Nancy for a second, because the generational aspects of these different platforms, and you're working with students all the time. Let's get into that discussion about, someone mentioned TikTok before, and we've, talked about Twitter and Instagram, and what's going on with all those different brands, and is it a generational issue? So do you have to know who you're marketing and therefore where they are?
Absolutely. And to pick up on what Brooke and Doug said, you can't be tone deaf when you're responding to your audiences, regardless of what platform they're on. You have to really make sure that they feel heard. Yeah. And that you understand the question or the problem or the situation that they're posing. Because not only do you end up, if you don't take the time to listen properly, not only do you come off as, being, just a robot, you also come off as aloof or not really understanding, your base. And they're reaching out to understand you. So based on the type of social media platform, really it depends on everyone goes to social media to be entertained. That's what it is. So we as a brand have to figure out, they want to engage with us. How are we going to entertain them as they're engaging with us as well? So I think that's why TikTok is so popular. You might have that whole 60 seconds to create your video, but the most popular ones is we're seeing 10, 30 seconds. And it is, you're out there reaching the audience because everyone loves visuals and we have a short attention span.
Yeah.
Well, we have a lot of choices.
Yeah, we do have a lot of choices, but again, these different market segments, as Brooke was saying, you use a platform differently.
Yeah. I often tell people like there's that combination, right? Is if I go to Netflix, I might watch 5 seconds of 20 different shows before I find one, and then the next 48 hours I'm stuck on. And so we have these choices and we get these quick glimpses. And so you have to make an impact quick, but then people will deep dive, they'll read the white paper and the case study or watch the, watch a Joe Rogan podcast for 4 hours. Right. It's pretty incredible that we wrestle with that as a brand. We have to get people's attention. We have to get them engaged quickly, otherwise they're going to go away, but once we have them, if we sustain that value and that entertainment factor and everything else, we can hang on to them.
Because you're right, Doug, because one of the metrics that we all know is, there's that 5-second rule. Yeah. That's a metric. Are they on there for 5 seconds or are they longer? If you can't keep them for 5 seconds, then
you've got it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do the metrics change from platform to platform?
Mm-mm. No, I don't think so.
No, I don't think of the 5-second rule. No.
And on Twitter, when people engage in Twitter, research shows that they sit on Twitter for about 3 to 4 minutes at a pop.
Yeah.
So that is their form of entertainment. Oh, I'm waiting for my meeting right now. I'm going to pop on Twitter. Well, you have your 3 to 4 minutes. And then you go on to do your next thing. So you have to figure out how quickly can I get them engaged so that they come back and read my white paper.
Right. Yeah. TikTok even has those ads that pop up I don't know how often it is. I'm embarrassed to admit that I've actually seen it a few times. It says, you've been scrolling way too long, right?
I always think it's like when I get the Netflix message, are you still watching? I think what a loser I am. I am still watching.
Yeah. Let me go back to my question about generations, though. The generational aspect and the Gen Y versus the Gen Z and the baby boomers. Are they interacting with all of these different platforms and different digital marketing venues differently? So is my 80-year-old mother still dependent on email, and is that going to resonate with her? So depending on who I'm trying to target, I need to change my digital marketing direction.
I think so, Kara. I think what's so important too is to be mindful of any individual person, right? How your target persona is utilizing each of the platforms based on that need set, right? For work, I might be all about LinkedIn, but in my entertainment time or thinking about my son and what I might need to buy for him versus for myself, looking at things entirely differently. We were just having that conversation this morning for work with my CEO about why are so many people so excited to buy over email? And I was making this hypothesis of maybe how I shop as mom is very different than how I shop as Brooke, right? That I followed an Instagram ad through and bought a pair of shoes in like 2 minutes yesterday because I'm so excited to have my second shot and like go back into the world. But, I'm still readily checking email sales when it comes to stuff for my son, because I kind of have a backlog of like, I know he's going to need new shorts in his size when we're ready. And, there it popped up. So I do think it's not necessarily just generational, but your persona, and in which instances it's for self versus shopper or gatekeeper for someone else, if it's for work versus personal, right? And then it's finding the right messages so that it's relevant on that platform, right? I think sometimes you see a lot of people right now feeding over, I made this really, delightful piece of content on TikTok. And so I swapped it over to Instagram, and it's like, well, but the aspect ratios are different. And so the caption you put up here is interesting, but it's cropped out on Instagram, right? So I think it's not only making sure that you're mindful of who is it that you're trying to speak to in what moment of their day, what is their need state, but is it the right platform and the right content? Yeah, Nancy.
That's absolutely correct. Just because you have that tool doesn't mean you need to use it.
Yeah.
All right. You don't have to be on every platform, because you need to be on the platforms that you're able to make sure that you're able to engage and listen with.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. This has been a fascinating conversation. I feel like we could go on for hours and hours, but I think that there's some really interesting threads here, common with all of you. And Connection brought you guys together to make these connections, but you all brought something very different to the discussion. So I want to thank you for that. Final question, though, for each of you is some advice for people just getting started, or some advice for people who are struggling. What was something you wish you knew when you first started that, only through years of experience? So Brooke, let me start with you.
Yeah, great question. And I think especially for someone, if they're getting started in the digital marketing realm, right, trying to bring their business, their brand up to speed. I love what Nancy just said, right? Just because it's all there doesn't mean you need to be doing it all. And to say, what are those concentric circles you're going to move in? Maybe first it's mastering Google and all that's there from a search engine tool, like Doug said, or Facebook and Instagram, because you can get synergies on the common ad platform. It's finding one thing to do well and then moving outside of it to build an ad as you gain those capabilities, rather than worrying about spreading too thin and doing it all at once, but doing none of them well.
Good point. Okay, Nancy.
Yeah, that would be the worst, because absolutely. Mine is, to take risks and set time limits. Try something new, but just because you try something new and it does, make sure that you can say, I'm going to measure it and see, is it working? And be confident and say, okay, I took the risk. It's not working. I'm going to cut the cord.
Yeah, good point. Okay, Douglas.
I'd say two things. One is a lot of online requires momentum. So to Nancy's point, you absolutely want to set a time and you want to see whether it's working, but be excited when you have 2 followers. Be excited when you go to 4, like that means that you are resonating, you are getting somewhere. And I think a lot of people look up to someone with tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of followers, and they quit. And they quit too early. They had something of value to provide someone. And so think of it as always as a trend, And then the second one that I would say, and I think this is a perfect example, is we don't talk enough about investing in our network, in our social networks. And that's that here we are, 4 people that basically do this for a living, and we're providing free advice, experience that we've seen that, if this was a consulting session, it would probably cost a couple $1,000s, and so go be brave, go out there on social networks and connect with people and ask questions and ask for help. You would be incredibly surprised at how awesome people are out there at providing their time and advice and direction. It's I love it. I mean, I'm still, sometimes you can get down on social media or whatever because the stories, may go negative or cultural negativity, but overall there's a ton of good out there and a ton of people that'll help.
That's really good advice. Thank all of you. Okay, so to conclude, Connection would like to thank our brilliant speakers, Nancy Salisbury, Brooke Mallick, and Douglas Karr, and we'd also like to thank Legion Star for their sponsorship today. Follow Connection on LinkedIn for more information about participating in our community, about making custom connections and impacting conversations like this. Watch the Connection LinkedIn page for information about our next session, which will be focused on data and security issues. So a replay of today's conversation will be available on our site, and we'll be posting summaries of our speakers' perspectives. So thank you again for participating, and stay safe, everybody.